There's more tools and technologies popping up and a lot of noise than you know what to do with. But the really exciting thing, especially if people know their business models and think outside the box, things are becoming possible that weren't before.
Hello and welcome to Beyond Borders, and I'm your host, Andrew Fahey. And in this podcast, we talk about the exciting challenges of taking your business globally. And we do that in three different ways. Sometimes we have business owners who've expanded their business internationally, where we can learn from what they've done, lessons learned and mistakes. Sometimes we talk to service providers that can help us as business leaders with their skills and expertise. And sometimes we just talk to pretty cool people with amazing stories and see what we can learn. And today we have somebody that probably touches all three of those, certainly the last two. And I'm really pleased to introduce my guest, Lindsay Jessup, the CEO of Geeks. Lindsay, welcome to Beyond Borders.
Pleasure to be here.
So we like to start people off really easy. Just tell us your story. How did you end up here today?
Oh, so where do I start? June 8th, born. So long way from home. Canadian, so Beyond Borders definitely resonates with me. So I was immediately, I would say, kind of drawn to problem solver aspects of my life. I could tell some fun anecdotes about my kindergarten stories and my teachers calling in my parents.
Jump in a little bit.
Yeah, I was going to say, let's take it to, I was on a conveyor belt to be a lawyer. So all of my studies and my education didn't know much about technology. Then I went to a school that specialized in bringing technology into education. And that was sort of my first dabble into computer science. Fast forward, I still went to law school. I moved to the UK, found parallels between bringing together different cultures, different challenges, but still very much, I thought, solving problems, become a judge. That's where you can make a big impact, right? Why not? So that was kind of the path or the conveyor belt, as I say, I was on. But then as I started to, immerse myself more in technology, I realized that people were going to experience technology in a different way in the future. So after law school, I decided, okay, scrap that. What convertible skills could I bring to a different industry, being tech? And then I went to Geeks right away. Okay. They had a very clever campaign around pivoting into tech. And off I went. So that's how I started in the tech space. And today they kind of tease me because one of the first things I said in the interview when I said I wanted to lead the legal sector was because I thought a lot of those jobs would be replaced by technology.
And
10 years later, yes, 10 years later, here we are.
So Canadian, want to be a lawyer, moved to the UK. Now CEO of Geeks. It'd just be great to give an overview, shameless plug of Geeks and what are the services that you bring for your clients.
Yeah, so Geeks specializes in being that total tech ally for the age of AI. So we do digital transformations, essentially, everything from the strategy, design, and engineering of services.
Excellent, and we'll certainly drill into that. Okay, so let's start with strategy then. And I have a hypothesis. So my background was technology, moving into sort of broader leadership. Not very good, not obviously your level of technology. I actually don't feel like there's much difference today between a business strategy and a tech strategy. They're actually the same. Can you share some insights of how you see that sort of coming about to play from your perspective at Geeks?
Yeah, 100%. So you actually hit the nail on the head, and that's something we find we need to educate people a lot on because more traditionally, you would go off and you would say to your CTO or your CIO or whoever you have in your team, a tech person, to say, okay, give me a tech strategy to deliver this business plan. Now, what you end up having is very detached, disconnected strategy and tech goals often is what that ends up being, and no real bridge of how to deliver that. Moreover, now we talk about that you need to have more of a spry strategy because the pace at which things are advancing, especially when you want to get to the really good stuff like business model innovation, scaling, then you need to be able to be searching, scanning, and adapting, and having almost an element of R&D and growth to support that. So those are some of the big changes that I see happening.
And does that differ between sector at all, between country, or is this like a universal change that actually technology empowers the strategy so much you just can't afford to ever think of them differently now?
Yeah, so actually it's something that different industries and sectors are definitely going to get disrupted faster than others. And you also need to factor in human nature. So everyone nowadays is talking about generative AI and the impact of large language models. And the big thing, really, the difference there is before AI, and we've been doing this for over a decade now, by the way. So AI isn't new, but now it's a lot more accessible. The barriers to entry are lower. So that means more businesses are innovating with it, and it's happening faster. Now, what that means really is that you'll start to see in different countries, in different regions that have, so in emerging markets, they'll still be focusing on some infrastructural pieces, but in a lot of ways, actually, they can even leapfrog or do other things once the basics are there. And then the more evolved markets, you'll see a lot more innovation, for example, happening because basic IT infrastructure, the old ways of looking at technology and strategy will be different. And now you need to really create and disrupt. And then when you talk about the different businesses and industries, for example, you're going to see anything that's more intelligent, like professional services, for example. There's a lot more, including actually technology, there's a lot more disruption happening in those services than things that are more, for example, manual manufacturing, those kinds of things. However, as the hardware is advancing, things like Internet of Things, where you see devices and sensors and those things coming in, you see more and more cool emerging technologies happening there.
You mentioned AI there, and a lot of listeners to this podcast are senior executives, business leaders, and a comment you made there around businesses that are actually earlier on in their tenure can use things like AI to leapfrog and maybe catch well-established competitors and displace the market. Just give the listeners a sense of how AI is influencing business strategy at the moment.
Yeah, I think it's honestly, for me, it's one of the most exciting times in my career. Also a little bit more of the exhausting time in my career because there's more tools and technologies popping up and a lot of noise than you know what to do with. But the really exciting thing, especially if people know their business models and think outside the box, things are becoming possible that weren't before. So if I give you an example of to start up a strategy, we have an app, for example, and it's an English learning app. Now, part of that business strategy was to create another value chain where you were creating tutors to help people practice online and simulate learning. Now, you have all sorts of aspects to that business plan, like creating a gig economy, right? Yeah. So you need to get the tutors, they need to be reliable, you need to safeguard. There's a whole sort of business strategy that goes around that. But since the invent of large language models and AI and the accessibility there, in 2 weeks, we were able to launch an AI tutor. And we even have different people that we can make it more fun and engaging. So you can learn and practice your English vocabulary with Barack Obama or whoever, what character, Adele, I think is another one. You can pick different characters and then they engage from a personality point of view. And it connects more, it's hyper-personalized experiences with your user. So that's just one way. That's something that didn't exist. You can do now in weeks and leapfrog.
And you used sort of words of exciting and innovating. I guess fear can be put into there. And this is obviously not me because I'm quite young, hip hop and happening as a leader. People of a certain generation, how do we as business leaders tap into that level of innovation? Because actually, you know, there's a Henry Ford element to this, isn't there? That actually there's a cohort of leaders that just want a faster horse here and are not able to see the future. Do you see that? How are you helping different demographics get on board with the capabilities?
Yeah, that is actually the hardest part, I would say, of what I do. And that's, you kind of touched on one of my main missions. And we have a phrase we call dare or die. And really what the harsh truth is you have to help businesses dare. And I use the analogy of the walking in the woods example, and it's better to just walk even if you're walking in the wrong direction than not, because then at least you learn you're going in the wrong direction than not moving at all. So I think that's the simplest way that I try to get business leaders to feel safe to move. But then there's different frameworks and tools out there. One of the ones that we've created to help business leaders understand is, with the age of AI, and there's a lot of change that's going to happen to people. And a lot of people want to protect their people, but also understand what is going to be human in the future world. And part of that means engaging with understanding what we call our dare, die bullseye, which is in the external. What is happening in the outward environment? What's happening with the regulation in your industry? If you're in legal, HR, whatever the case may be, what is the external constraints of what you're working with? Then who are your stakeholders? Who are your clients? And you bring it all the way in to really identify what is uniquely human. And then the rest of that, you need to look at your overall business strategy of what are you trying to achieve? And the art is you understand how technology in the future is going to look with your business. And that means, yes, you do need to probably talk to and be bold and going out there and talking with technologists. We use the phrase radical collaboration, like be open to take more meetings than you've ever taken just to understand the different facets of what's happening in technology. And then just be really smart about sourcing your libraries of content so you don't get flooded with the wrong information. And I think when you do that and just start educating yourself naturally, it falls into place and you start to feel more confident to take steps to move forward.
So unfair, putting you on the spot a little bit, we are Beyond Borders and we're helping businesses expand. Just give a throwaway example of how a business leader who's looking to maybe expand into different regions could use AI to leapfrog and accelerate that growth strategy.
Yeah, that's the...
Take notes.
Yeah, this is my favorite part. And I think part of the fun part of the process is just ideating, because every business is unique. But there are case studies that you can kind of see that can transcend an industry sector. So a scaling problem, there's different key problems that you'll face. Sometimes it's things like the less sexy one, if you will, would be training and collateral. How do you optimize that experience when you're going into another country and empower? Really, it's about empowering your local managers, isn't it? So you can use AI to create not only training collateral and content and generate it in different languages. All of that becomes click of a button versus needing to get translation.
Armies of HR stuff to do.
Exactly. So that's a very sort of basic example. There's ways that you can generate assessments at a click of a button now, like all of the learning, training, safeguarding, that can be done much more efficiently. There's really cool stuff too, though. So there's ways that you can now create, and it's a bit spooky. So with seconds of, for example, recording my voice reading, AI can generate my voice again and generate content.
It's very scary.
You can take videos of yourself just moving around and then use that to do speaking and create doubles. So it's actually that's the AI ethics and responsibility piece, which we won't get into right now.
But I guess taking those two things there, in people's mind's eye, are really sort of, it would be impersonal doing training videos. But actually what you're saying is it can take your voice, your image, and create those training videos as if it was you doing it without you suffering the overhead of actually doing that yourself.
Exactly. So it's automatically making it more scalable. And where this becomes really interesting is, think about services that you need a very, like, the person conveying that experience, that message really matters. So this is where the brand ambassador, if you will, the face of that is going to be really important. Now, there's also arguments that you can create. I actually did a really cool project in Vietnam about creating AI influencers and models and stuff, which is a whole other space, but that's really cool. And you can do collaborations there. But think about just the different, so we had an example where lived experiences was really important. So for harm prevention, someone conveying that, and now they can take that where they were only able to tap into English speaking markets. Now they can use that same expression, but then they can use language dubbing and have that same person convey that in Latin America, for example, where they weren't previously able to penetrate that market.
It's so interesting, scary, and invigorating at the same time. And I guess what really resonated with me there is the you're just going to have to speak to different people. You're going to have to get new experiences. You're probably going to have to change the age demographic and the experience demographic of your leadership team as well to keep this not just something that you just write, we need to understand AI. It has to be part of your very ethos as a leadership team.
Yeah, I think also more mechanically, there's a different, and it's a hard thing because visionaries, the exciting part is trying to imagine what's possible. So there's that blue sky thinking that you need to constantly be doing. But then where a lot of people miss is where the boots hit the ground, which is empowering the team. So we call it a digital evolution roadmap. And you have 3 lanes in that roadmap. So the top lane is how much are you willing to invest in your R&D? How much are you willing to invest in the growth of your business? So that's things that are either going to bring you massive operational efficiencies for your EBITDA, or obviously top line growth, revenue. And then the BAU is how do you make sure that you don't become susceptible to, vulnerabilities, keeping the performance going, all of that stuff. And then if you're clear on those budgets and then the initiatives that would form in those roadmaps, that empowers your team and your people to get engaged. And we have a behavioral economist called Roger Martin Fahey. I'm not sure if you've heard of him.
No.
But he always says if you don't have, he used to say millennials on your board, you need to now, but now it's if you don't have a Gen Z on your board, or at least, I know, I'm feeling old saying, but if you don't have them.
I have a child that might be Gen Z, I'm not sure.
Yeah, well, maybe you should start considering fast tracking to your board. But if you don't start bringing that diversity of thought and opinion, then, and I think this is where having cross-cultural, gender, being diversity and inclusion piece actually will bring real value there.
So we talk there about the need to evolve leadership teams, to have multi-generational talents working together. And this great opportunity for me to formally congratulate you on becoming CEO of Geeks as well, and well deserved. But now as CEO and sort of sat there and responsible for the sort of the future roadmap of Geeks, how do you think about your own business against this sort of ever evolving technology roadmap?
Well, it's a good question, and it's one that challenges me every day because in practice, I want to be practicing what we preach and pioneering. We talk about that we see the age we're in now as, have you heard the phrase liminal space?
No.
Liminal space. So that's how we sort of characterize it right now, which means leaders were leading in a very foggy space. Imagine everything is unclear. And often they use the example of a corridor. So you kind of left the room you were just in, but you don't yet know what's in the room in front of you.
Okay.
So it's a bit foggy, uncertain. Balls are getting thrown at you, you need to catch.
Sounds like a scary corridor.
It sounds like a very scary corridor. And that's honestly the reality. So when you talked earlier about the fear, that's the reality. But I think if leaders get it right, then, and I've started calling it a chaos cartographer. And cartography is the art of mapping. So back in the explorer days, people would be mapping out the direction you're going. And then, we get here. Actually, that's probably a mountain. We should probably go that way. And really, I see that's the role of business leaders in this time. So the art of doing that is making it super, super clear as much as you can, but knowing that you can only see so far in front of you. And that's a lot of discipline, a lot of explaining, a lot of communicating to the team in the way that they understand that they need to seek clarity just as much as leaders need to give it. But then beyond that, I think it's just being smart about your systems and processes and aligning them to your business. So the main pitfall that I see businesses go into is they have this grand strategy and this big vision. And then they go and they have their tech strategy, which we kind of talked about before. And they haven't properly lined up. And even, to be fair, it's not for the best of endeavor saying, here's the business case, this is what we're going to go deliver. But they haven't really prioritized and look at how are they moving the needle and thought enough about how technology, with the advancements, they don't go back and say, well, this new technology means that we can move faster here. And that takes a bit of courage and bravery because it means you need to pivot on your strategy. So having that process embedded so that people can bottom up and top down navigate a digital evolution is where I see it fall down the most because it involves a lot of change management.
And when we take that down to specifics, because there will be business owners of all different shapes and sizes, small startups, big corporates listening to this. And this might be wrong, so feel free to correct, but that's how I think about the Internet of Things. When I think about being in those boardrooms and setting big grand strategies and setting off on creating bespoke software to deliver on those, and then something over here comes, well, I'm too invested in this now.
Yeah.
There's too much sort of CapEx and there's too much value and it has to work. The Internet of Things, the concept of stitching lots of things together allows us to be fleet of foot and maybe not suffer that same drain on investments as well. Am I thinking about that right?
Completely right. If you were to ask me a couple of years ago what we were doing as a business, we were doing these huge, like, global digital transformations. And even then we weren't advising it, to be fair. But now people are getting that the best way to deliver value is deliver it in small increments. That's what we call evolution. You should be every quarter, your business should feel slightly different than the quarter before. And evolution doesn't happen overnight. And then if you're taking those steps, that allows you to pivot. And I think more practically, if you're setting up, when you say Internet of Things and bringing things together, and then in more technical terms, it's like microservices, so you can plug things in. It's almost a plug and play model. That'll give you the flexibility to where something is novel and has value to invest in creating. You have the flexibility to do that, and where you don't, you have something existing you can plug in. Yeah. And the other thing I would say is that's why it's very clear that you understand the role that AI and technology plays in your strategy. Because for some things, it might be that your strategy is to stand on the shoulder of giants. And what that means is the existing big players, like, we would never encourage you to reinvent the wheel and recreate the exact same thing as Culture Amp, for example, for an HR system, unless you have something really proprietary and different to do. And then if that's the case, your strategy for those suppliers is that you're super engaged with them. You know ahead of time what their roadmaps are going to be and how that can bring more value to the business. But if your strategy is going to be one that also will have an element of intellectual property creation, which is a huge, obviously, part of business strategy, then it's about understanding where are your biggest opportunities. And that is where radical collaboration is going to be really key.
And I think it is easy to think this is only available to big businesses with bottomless R&D budgets as well. And I think that's something that certainly from our conversations, both today and you know, when we spoke about tech strategy in the past, that's certainly something that I almost awakened to, that actually, no, this is something that we've got to be thinking about now, how the role as a CEO is changing, as you just said. And maybe how we think about the role of the CIO as well. So if you think about the traditional tech leader on the board, well, we've already talked about that the business and tech strategy are almost symbiotic. So gone of the days where the tech leader just sits over there playing with toys and gadgets. Have you seen the DNA of the CIO change over recent times?
Yeah, and it obviously, I caveat that it depends on the business, the industry, the sector, but what I touched on earlier about the CIO role used to be very much infrastructure-based and information-based, to be fair. And really good ones understand now and have moved the businesses to really get how important data is to a business strategy. So there's a complete element of, and this is where CEOs often get bored and maybe what you start to see yawns when you start talking about data architecture and information flows.
We've already done a podcast on data, so if I was bored, the audience will be able to see in that. So pretty much I wasn't.
Well, that's good. And I would say the art, what is different now is, I would say CIOs need to be more data conscious in a way that transforms and innovates a business. And this is me putting a blanket. There are amazing CIOs out there, but a lot of them historically were trained just to handle information, to support the business leaders to better handle their business. Now, everyone in a senior leadership position needs to better understand, especially in emerging markets, in less predominant markets, that is still what you might see. But in more progressive markets, you need to be able to innovate to thrive. Yeah. Otherwise, you lose the competitive advantage. So a big part, long story short, of the role needs to be innovation transformation in their job descriptions.
And I guess the relationship between the CEO and the CIO has to be now more akin to the CEO and the CFO relationship traditionally, where it's well known that there's a sort of symbiotic nature with those. It has to be the same now with the CIO.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that comes down to the art of team building, really. And I guess you talk about the role of the CEO. I think the art of the CEO, and I think sporting analogies always come in here, but how you form your team will determine how you win. And that's going to be really important there. You might not even controversially need a CIO.
Yeah.
I wouldn't always want one, depending on the business, or suggest one.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about the sort of evolution of the C-suite here with the need to have multi-generational talents, the role of the CIO changing, the relationship with the CEO changing. I guess you've got some great experience for our audience here just about knitting together diverse workforces as well, whether that's different cultures, backgrounds, different geographies. Just be great to hear how you think about that from Geeks' perspective. Yeah,
I think that was something I learned through graft in the hard way, how difficult that actually can be, but how rewarding it is when you get it right. And I think, and this actually is a non-technology tip, but one of the best things that I learned from my experience is how to leverage technology, but to be more human. Understanding that different regions and cultures have higher or lower context, and trying to adapt and use, be a bit more resourceful in how I communicate to people and how our teams are set up to communicate and facilitate has been an absolute game changer. And even something as simple as translating, trying to speak languages, trying to understand how to adapt to that has made a big difference. But ultimately, it just comes down to engagement. Yeah. So there's simple things that you can do to build a culture. And this comes down to when I said earlier, everything should link to your overall vision and understanding what role technology has to play. That should feed into your values, how you recognize your team and the people, no matter where you hire in the world. Yes, you need to have different understanding of cultural context, because different cultures have, different understanding of when promotion and pay raises should be due through everything. And you know better than I that comes in. But I think the big differentiator there is leveraging technology just to connect with people in a different way, be creative, and then show those values coming through. And a simple example that works really well is we have a recognition system that brings the values in. And no matter where we've worked in the world, when you bring people in that team, people engage in that, they align with the values, they come to the weekly touch points. And you can also, things that are possible now that weren't possible before are even things like co-working. This is going to sound really funny, but you can set up yoga, for example, and do it anywhere in the world. So building that engagement, I think leaders are letting themselves down if they don't take the time to do that, because when they do, that's when you hear things from the team that you wouldn't hear before. So that's one angle.
I'm not sure if you remember this. So deep into the COVID, how are we all dealing with working in a remote space, the time when we were banging our pans and everybody was doing quizzes all the time because we were trying to so really deep in that, you and I had a conversation around engagement and people and dynamics. And even then you'd innovated something, and it was the word engagement that triggered this for me. At the end of every day, wherever your workforce was, and I'll use the term log off script, but I'm sure it was more complicated than that. You asked your workforce how engaged they felt in what you were trying to achieve today. It wasn't, how do you feel? Can we do anything else? It's how engaged did you feel in what we're trying to do? And that really resonated with me at the time, because actually it was how can I make you feel part of the bigger picture? I haven't misremembered that.
No.
Actually happened.
I actually forgot. We still do that, and we've improved it. And we always, one of the other things I was going to say is how important making data-driven decisions are. So this is making that nice, warm thing also a bit clinical, but I think you have now the power to, when you ask people, you don't want to be that leader that doesn't listen. So once you get that data, what do you do with it? Which is fantastic. So during that, when I couldn't see people, and I was able to understand, I think we looked in 3 categories. So engagement, achievement, and stimulation. And then we gave them different criteria that they could select quickly. And then over time, we've evolved it as well, because research shows that the more you embed time to reflect, so people can almost do like a reflection journal at the end of the day, the more people feel motivated to not only grow, but self-correct. Yeah. So they reflect on, I could have done this better today, or I could harness this opportunity tomorrow, and set themselves up to succeed. And there's ways that technology you can use as a business leader to look at the macro trends and then try to improve in different areas of the business where you see something working.
And I think that I certainly try to adapt that and learn from it, and being involved in businesses that have acquired businesses and then actually sort of involved in a business that had territories in multiple countries, that how engaged you feel in what we're trying to do. Really, because I think my natural leadership style is a storyteller style anyway, so it really sort of hit home with me. And so for people that are trying to build remote teams for the first time, I think that's a great takeaway tip. One of the things I like to try and ask people as well, and some people find this a little bit more difficult, but is where have you got it wrong? We know we've all made loads of where have you tried to bring an international workforce together and it just didn't work for people to learn from as well?
Yeah, no, that's a huge point. And it's actually something we like to talk about a lot. And to be honest, even we don't always get it right, because you say things like, you see all these mantras come out in innovation cultures, like be humble, fail fast. Like, but what does that mean? Like, what is it? And are business leaders really willing to fail fast when it's a pretty epic, epic mistake? And I think really with that, to me, if I get that right, it's that when there are those epic failures, first of all, people feel safe, because if you don't have psychological safety, if they think that there's an epic failure and they feel like their job's at risk, then mistakes aren't going to be caught. And then you're also missing an opportunity to solve a problem. And I have a great CTO actually. And what I love is when we have these problems, and it's almost too quickly we go to solving the problem, but right away we think about, okay, what process innovation how can we improve our playbooks or our processes to help people and empower them? What systems could we put in place? And then even better if, like, is there an innovative approach to maybe solving a problem even beyond Geeks, or bring that to our clients?
So just be honest about it, be upfront about it, see what you can learn from it and move forward. I guess we're all on this journey, aren't we? We're the generation that's learning how to be this remote, agile workforce, aren't we? It was thrust upon us, and now we're reveling in it. And it's almost moving probably as quickly as the technology, our attitudes towards globalization as well.
I think a big part of that, and I used to underestimate the value of symbols and rituals and what you do. I don't like too much cliche things. It sounds funny because I bet if you did buzzword bingo on this, I've been spewing them today. But symbols and rituals really help to make that happen. So the common example you'll see in software is agile delivery, right? Because at the end of that, you always do a retrospective. And the purpose of a retrospective, if you facilitate it correctly, is you look at what worked, what didn't work, what do you want to stop, start, continue. There's sad, mad, glad, all those different frameworks you can apply. And then the idea is you take that and you embed it in your business. So the more opportunities you facilitate to get feedback and create spaces where people feel open. And also, as a leader, I try to always pick up in a room if someone's not being honest or lead with vulnerability, because often if you lead with vulnerability.
That's my favorite tactic. I always start with, this is where I got it wrong and here's what I learned, rather than here's all the amazing things that we've achieved. I think it just brings the level of sort of openness out in a different way.
Do you know, you just reminded me of a conversation. This was probably going on a decade ago now. And something you said to me that really stuck with me was you actually had a member of your team make a pretty and I was talking to you about a similar example, a big mistake. And you said your approach was always to bring calm and say, we are where we are. We'll circle back later and find out how we got here. And I thought that was really nice as well, because often when people, especially business leaders, you can feel a little bit in a pressure cooker sometimes where you just need to make decisions and move things forward. But sometimes it's important to just say, well, we are where we are. And eventually we'll come back to see how we got here, and you can't leave it.
I think that's a leadership management thing, because the business is more important than the management of the individual that might have made the mistake.
Exactly.
And so that's how I sort of, memory lane.
So one of the things that we see are very helpful for our clients is you shape your vision, and then you create something called an organizational North Star. And that's bringing the design of your strategy to a very strategic cultural level. And then what you do is there's a whole process you go through, but ultimately the goal is you really define what customer value is. And then you go through a process of understand what game are you playing. So for example, a common one people understand is Netflix, for example. There's common games, like it could be the attention game, it could be a productivity game, it could be an innovation game. Netflix is really playing an attention game because the more people engage with it, the more they keep. And then ultimately you get to a point where you have one metric that every product, technology, everything you create should move that forward. And then all of your systems that you implement, things that you integrate into your ecosystem, you should be clear on what their product North Stars are. And then there's a checklist of criteria that we give. And one of them is that it shouldn't be a lagging indicator. So you don't find out after it happens, for example. It shouldn't be a vanity metric. So those numbers that make you feel good, like revenue growth or EBITDA, or it should be, it should link to what is your customer value. So an example would be LinkedIn. If it wouldn't be number of users logging in, that would be a vanity metric. You might select something, assuming they're playing a productivity game, for example. It might be something more like meaningful connections made between people, and you need to find how you measure them. So when you do that, that's how you can align your business strategy more.
I really like that. Great, absolutely gold dust of a tip, that. Well done. You have reached the section, quick fire. And make sure the quick fire, we've had some guests that were very long answers in the quick fire questions. So
one word?
You'll see when they ask the question. Favorite country to visit in the entire world?
Canada.
Top tips for traversing cultural differences in the workplace. So that can't be a word, clearly.
Empathize and engage and really listen.
Love it. Weirdest thing you've ever been asked to innovate?
I don't think I can say that on your podcast.
Second weirdest thing you've ever been asked?
I would say they wanted us to use, it's very geeky, but they wanted us to use a Raspberry Pi to open doors, but we didn't know where the doors would open to. They wouldn't tell us, but they wanted us to just open doors for them.
It was a secret where the door was.
Yeah, it was a secret weird door. And it was very weird the way they phrased it. So that stands out to me.
I like that. AI, our savior, or the opening scene to the Terminator movie?
Our savior with a caveat, depends on how I'm joking. So I think it will be, AI will happen because it can. And I'm very hopeful because I think it's a reflection of our society. And I think there will be Terminator moments, don't get me wrong. But because I truly believe that society is more often than not good, that it will be our savior.
I like it. And final one. Lots of people in our audience now will be sat there unsure how to even start on their AI journey. Quick fire pep talk for them about where they should start. Yeah.
So from the beginning, a very good place to start. So one thing is there's some questions. Start with some resources. So start by attending some. So for example, we even have webinars that I can share on things that are just basic tips on how to make, and I would say better data-driven decisions, because that's really what you want to look to do. You want to identify opportunities, but you want to make data-driven decisions. And to do that well, you also need to go back to the root of your business strategy. Think of that dare, die, bullseye, what's happening on the outside, and bring it into what is human. look at your vision, and then really make sure that your tech strategy and business strategy are one. That it's not just separate projects going on, that they overlap. I think if you do that, you'll certainly be off to a good start. And as we talked about earlier, talking to people, collaborations, it's more important than ever. So put yourself out there.
So many useful nuggets of information. Let me attempt to summarize.
I didn't make it easy. I'm sorry.
No. You if I can understand it, then anyone can understand it. So, the role of technology within a business is now not a separate work stream. Business strategy and technology strategy are almost symbiotic. And because of that, we as leaders, when we're building our teams, whether that be in our own country or globally as we're expanding, need to think about the role of the CEO, the CIO, how entwined they are, whether or not there's the right generational balance in there, whether or not you need full-time resource, or actually it's moving so quickly, is plugging into a virtualized CIO actually a better thing for us all now. That the need to be agile and almost pride not coming before the fall is more important than ever. And things like the Internet of Things allow us as business leaders to do that. And as we stitch all these new things together, actually there was an undercurrent there which will get a level of familiarity, which was just listen, be nice, learn, be respectful of different cultures. Did I do okay at Summer? Did I miss anything?
You did great. Yeah? No, I don't. I mean, job done.
So where can people find out more about the great work that you do at Geeks, resources for people to sort of tap into? Great just to hear a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So on our website, there's loads of things on there. So you can find access to webinars. We do exclusive roundtables that are industry specific. So if anyone has a specific industry that they'd like us to facilitate one on, the next one, it's more exclusive because we cap the invitee list. But if anyone's curious, we're doing one coming up for AI and construction industry, for example, and then legal, you name it. So there's things like that. And then ultimately, it's just reach out to me, LinkedIn, because I'm always open to have conversations to learn more about what people are doing and how technology is going to shape the future of their business.
Thank you so much. Amazing guest. Proud to call you a friend as well. So lots of great lessons learned today that hopefully people have found useful. Please do reach out to Lindsay and Geeks. Certainly a resource that I've used over the years as well. And until next time, keep pushing beyond borders. Thank you. That's just so you know where to put the sound in.
Yeah.